Hello, welcome. Hi, Sheridan.
Hi, Martha. Nice to be here with you.
You too. So, and welcome to everyone else on this day where we are exploring the feminine. And I'm so happy to have Sheridan here because when I first started feeling into what needed or wanted to come through in the symposium, the funny thing was it felt like there needed to be exploration of aspects of the feminine, explorations of aspects of the masculine. And of course, when I started asking people if they would like to be speakers and what they might like to speak on, the number one thing that I got first from people was they all wanted to speak about Venus. And then every single one of those speakers changed their mind because I kept saying, oh yeah, you're about the fourth person who said they want to speak on Venus. So they all said, oh no, never mind. I want to speak on whatever other thing it was. So then I was left with actually no one speaking on Venus. And I felt like this is really key. When we're going to explore the feminine, we need to talk about Venus. And my learning of astrology has been almost totally with Ari Moshe-Wolf in evolutionary astrology. And so I really haven't learned about Venus cycles or any of these things that we are about to speak to today. And so I am very excited because this is like my own little private tutoring session. Not really, but I'm really, really happy to get the opportunity to personally learn, personally dive into these topics. And specifically, I love what you're going to be speaking to, Sheridan, which is the title of this talk, but you're calling it is Seeking Your Sacred Feminine with Venus and Trusting the Underworld. And I love all of the many layers of what Venus represents and the fact that you want to speak to the aspects of Venus that aren't just love, beauty, sex, love and light. There's so much more to it. And yeah, this probably could be, well, you do teach multi-week classes on this. And so, yes, it could be multi-week thing, but I'm really excited for what we can dive into in this time together. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited that I'm the one that gets to teach and talk about Venus because I'm all about the Venus cycle. I was out early this morning to see Venus with Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. And, so I'm just excited to, turn people onto it who aren't aware of it or don't know, or hopefully, people that are, bring them into something that they weren't aware of or didn't know, or help take it to a deeper place in some way.
That's so beautiful. And before we really begin, I just want to read your bio so people can know a little more about you. So Sheridan Semple is a certified shamanic astrologer, holistic health practitioner, clinical aromatherapist, and certified nutritionist. That is many facets of healing all in one. She offers shamanic astrology readings, weaving in sacred aromatherapy to support the archetypes in one's chart, as well as the current cycles one is experiencing. She co-teaches Venus Ceremonial Journeys online with Cayelin K Castell, also speaking in this symposium, and who I love.
That wealth of knowledge there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And such a good human.
Yes.
Yeah. Sheridan teaches classes and holds study groups in both astrology and aromatherapy, and she holds monthly online new moon ceremonies. Several times a year, she instructs a medicinal aromatherapy certification course through Wisdom of the Earth Aromatherapy. And then you can find out more at her website. Yeah, is there anything else you want to add about who you are or what's important to you in your work? Or
the biggest thing for me is that what really calls to me is bringing the earth and the sky together, right? So for me, it's aromatherapy because I apprenticed with a traditional naturopath, and that was really the form of medicine along with food that I had learned from him. But it doesn't have to be aromatherapy for you, right? It could be anything. It could be herbs or flower essences or crystals or going and hugging trees, right? Just anything that helps ground us and connect us into the vibration of the earth, which then in turn connects us into the vibration of the archetypes, which is what the astrology is really all about. And then by extension brings us into the vibration of the cosmos. I just think the bridging of those two things is what helps bring us into resonance vibration with who we really are, which is what we're all seeking to express and why we're here, you know, what we're trying to learn and grow to become and be. So that's my passion. So
Well,
that's
I
why I
love
love the Venus cycle.
even the what you have behind you, that your aromatherapy
Oh yeah.
tray
Yeah.
with the moon, and then your earrings are like mirroring that. And it's like this, I don't know, almost like this step from that, the thing on your wall, to your earrings, to your heart. Like it's this, I don't know, somehow it's making me think of, you know, the parallel realities, kind of what you're talking, bridging the earth and sky. Or it's like it's right there in the visual.
Nice.
Really
Unplanned, but I'll take it. Yeah. Unintentional, but yeah.
it feels really cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So where do you want to begin with?
Well, let's start with diving into the Venus cycle. So I created some slides to go through that, and then we'll just have a kind of a discussion after that as well. And of course, you know, jump in, share anything at any time as we're going through these slides. So we'll start the slideshow, and you can see that, I presume.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So here we are, Venus, right?
Sorry, that's just a very beautiful picture. Wow. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, a Venus, right? Just so gorgeous, right? Our sacred feminine planet. So seeking your sacred feminine with Venus and trusting the underworld with me, Sheridan. And what we're going to be learning today is we're going to learn what Venus represents, what the Venus cycle is, how it works, how to work with it, the astro mythology that chronicles the Venus cycle. That's part of how we interact with the Venus cycle. Lots of different ways to do it. So I'm just going to be throwing things out there and you take what you like. Chakra healing with Venus, the magic, super magic of the Venus cycle, and then the underworld as the path to re-becoming the one, right? The reason why we're all here for this symposium.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for tying it all to that. Wow.
Of course, that's why we're here, right? And Venus cycle is an amazing way to help us do that. So Venus in the shamanic astrology paradigm represents an exploration of the divine feminine through the many different archetypes and phases of the Venus cycle. So from the shamanic astrology perspective, Venus is not limited to concepts like you were talking about, like romance, relationships, personal aesthetics, or values around money and material possessions, right? So we can see Venus sometimes limited in conventional or contemporary times to these specific areas, but instead, I think of Venus as the sacred feminine archetype, right? The goddess herself in all of her many aspects, from Aphrodite to Kali to Inanna to Sekhmet to Hecate, right? All the way from Aries to Pisces, right? All of it, everything that can go into the feminine category, that's what Venus represents for me. And what we're going to be learning today with this Venus cycle is inspired by Daniel Giamario's research into the synodic cycle of Venus that he did in the 1990s. And he is the founder of the Shamanic Astrology paradigm, and he's the co-founder of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, along with Cayelin K Castell, who we were just talking about a moment ago, right? So following the Venus cycle is essentially an initiatory journey. It's about actively tuning into the sacred feminine within and around you, understanding the importance of working with both the sky and earth medicine, learning to trust yourself and your intuition, consciously participating in the rebirth of the sacred feminine in all ways that benefit all life, and listening to the call to reconnect with our ancestral ways of communing with the earth and sky, and intentionally liberating blockages to our chakras and reclaiming our rightful power within each one, right? And so the sacred feminine exists within all of us, just like the sacred masculine exists within all of us, no matter how we identify as female, male, non-binary, right? We all have the yin and the yang that make up that sacred whole that is us, right? So this is not a journey that is just for people who identify as women and feminine, right? It's for everyone that feels called to, drawn to work with the sacred feminine within themselves and their lives.
And I just want to say, I love that image that you had on there too. These are so multi-layered and beautiful.
Thank you. So here's just an overview of it, and then we're going to dive into the pieces, parts of this, right? So the Venus synodic cycle, which I'll explain that in a moment, if you don't know what a synodic cycle is, it lasts for 584 and a half days, or about 19 months, right? So one cycle, one Venus cycle is this 19-month cycle. The Venus cycle begins and ends when Venus rises before the sun in the morning sky as morning star. That's the beginning of the cycle, and it ends just right before that starts again. Over the course of the cycle, the Venus phases are these 4 phases: morning star, where it begins; the underworld, when Venus is with the sun, behind the sun; evening star, when you see Venus in the evening sky; and then what we call the metamorphic underworld, when Venus is between us and the sun, and again, we can't see her, right? The overtone for the entire cycle is the zodiac sign Venus rises in as morning star. So right now, the cycle that we're in is the Capricorn cycle, but there's 5 of them. So there's also Leo, which will be the next cycle. Then Pisces is the one after that. Then Libra or Gemini. Okay. So let's talk about the Venus synodic cycle, right? Begins and ends when Venus rises as morning star. So what is a synodic cycle? Synodic cycle versus the orbit around the sun. So a lot of times we can kind of think of like the Venus cycle is the time it takes Venus to orbit around the sun, but it's actually something different. So Venus orbits around the sun in 225 days, right? So faster, less time than it takes us, the Earth, to get around the sun. The synodic cycle is actually 19 months, that 584 days, right? So something different. So synodic means the relationship between the planets from the Earth's perspective. So it's the time it takes Venus to be seen again from our earthly perspective in that same position next to the sun, right, where she rises as morning star in the morning sky. That's a relationship with the sun where she's gotten far enough away from the sun that we can actually see her. She's not hidden in the light of the sun anymore. It takes 19 months for her to come back around to that place exactly again, because the Earth and Venus and the sun, we're all moving, right? So it's not the orbit. The synodic cycle is coming back to where we can see her in the same way with the sun.
So kind of it's like measuring the dance of Venus and Earth and Sun in their relationship to each other.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And we'll have this awesome little short video at the end that will show that dance is exactly the perfect word that you chose. Yeah, I love that. So the Venus synodic cycle has these 4 phases, right? I covered them before: morning star, underworld, evening star, metamorphic underworld. So now I'm going to explain what those are. So the morning star, it lasts about 8 months, give or take. And you can see here the horizon line, right? The sun hasn't quite risen, but Venus is up. And I took this snapshot when Venus was with Regulus, one of the royal stars. And then here in the picture on the right, I've just taken the Earth away so we can just see, right? So when I go out, if any of us are early risers, we go out in the early morning before the sun rises, we look into the eastern sky, the brightest planet we can see is Venus, right? So the sun is the brightest thing we see in the sky, the moon comes next, and Venus is third. So all of our ancestral people that we've all descended from all followed the Venus cycle and revered this cycle and paid attention to where Venus was moving through the sky, right? So this is what it looks like in the morning sky. And then here is what the Venus goddess morning star journey is all about. So Venus in Nana, and I'll explain that in a moment, spends about 8 months as morning star, descending into the underworld and releasing all distortions and blocks in the way of her expressing her masterfully wise, authentic self. This occurs at each monthly crescent moon-Venus conjunction, symbolizing the chakra gates as described in the tale of Inanna, which I will explain in more detail as we go along.
Sorry, so this is taking me a minute to process in my brain.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it will for other people too, because I do know astrology, and a lot of people who here won't know astrology at all. So can we just slow down and say this one more time?
Please.
Yeah. So Venus spends 8 months as a morning star, descending into the underworld and releasing all distortions and blocks in the way of, okay. So Venus is a morning star rising just before the sun.
Correct.
For 8 months. Got it. Okay. And this occurs at each monthly crescent moon Venus conjunction. Okay, that part I'm assuming is a different explanation, like the crescent moon. Oh, okay, so the moon will conjunct Venus in the sky as well. And when Venus happens to be a morning star, the moon also is a morning presence.
Morning
right?
moon. Yes.
Like, right. Because okay, so that is why when Venus is a morning star, it's going to be a crescent moon conjuncting Venus.
Yes.
Got it. I'm putting it all together. Okay.
Yeah. And this is so great. Thank you so much. Cause I'm so used to like teaching things. Sometimes I like overlook or don't remember what it was like to first learn it. So I really appreciate you doing that because Venus is between us and the sun. Venus can only get so far away from the sun from our earthly perspective, right? Mercury is even closer, it's less, right? It's smaller how far it can get. Where like Mars can be sort of like a full moon Mars, right? Venus can never be a full moon. It can never be on the opposite side of the sun from us. So it would never be a full moon conjunct Venus. That's just not possible. It's always going to be a crescent moon on one side or the other, waxing or waning, depending upon if it's in the morning sky or the evening sky. And if that's starting to get like too detailed for people, don't worry about it. But for you, Martha, I think you see what I'm saying, right? So it's like, So right now we're in the morning sky. So it's always going to be the waning crescent on the way to the new moon, right? So Venus, the last moon Venus conjunction was on May 26th. Yesterday, May 30th, was the new moon, right? So it always happens before. In the evening sky, it's just the opposite. It's going to be the waxing crescent moving away from the new moon, which personally, I just think adds to the like complete magic and amazingness of the Venus cycle. And I will explain more about the tale of Inanna and the chakra gates and all of that as we come into it. So
amazing. Yeah, I'm really
yeah,
enjoying it. Keep going.
thanks. But you asking your questions, I'm like, oh, maybe that could come sooner in the presentation, but we'll get there. So the next phase is the underworld, right? So this is when Venus is on the other side of the sun from us, and we can't see Venus. So for ancient people, they would be watching, right? We wouldn't be watching TV at night. We would be outside watching the sky, paying attention to everything. We'd watch Venus every day, every night. What's happening? What's going on? We'd see how she moves through the sky. We'd see Jupiter and Mars right now in the sky, right? Then all of a sudden we'd go out and Venus would disappear. We wouldn't see Venus. And we go, what happened, right? That's when we would say Venus went to the underworld because Venus got swallowed up by the sun, right? So this is the longer underworld. It lasts from 60 to 90 days when Venus is on the other side of the sun from us. And the Venus goddess underworld journey is all about Venus spending 2 to 3 months traveling behind the sun, hidden from our earthly view, hidden by the light, undergoing an alchemical transformation of death and rebirth into her wiser self. So the morning sky, she's descending to the underworld. And then as we come into the evening sky next, or evening star, again, another about 8 months, the sun will set in the west and Venus would still be up in the sky, will come to life as the sun is setting and the sky is getting darker.
And I was born as the sun was setting with Venus in my 8th house, right? So
yes, so then yes, great observation, right? So then you're part of the evening star phase of the Venus cycle, which leads me to just add then that it's like you're the part of the cycle where Venus has already been to the underworld. She's undergone that death and rebirth cycle. And now she's reborn into wiser, more of that kind of like elder knowledge sort of. It adds like more earth, like more of a Capricornian aspect to that part of the Venus cycle. So not only would it be about the sign that your Venus is in, but what phase would lend more information to what we're learning. Because let's say like your Venus was in Aries, right? That might be more fiery, but you would have this more, say it again. What'd you say?
Mine is in Aries.
Okay, perfect. Great example then. So then we would look at like, oh, Aries, right? Individuation, fire, kind of stepping into things. But your evening star, so would add this like wisdom. It adds a layer to Aries that is maybe a little bit more grounded, a little bit more thinking about things before fully rushing into it, like considering the options and then taking all of that Aries action, right? It would be different than if you were born in the morning sky, where it would add more of that fire to it because you haven't gone to the underworld yet. You haven't gone through that death to rebirth cycle, which, as we know, when we go into those more challenging times, we come out the other side wiser, more whole, carrying more knowledge, right? That's what that evening star phase is all about. So here in the second picture, I've just taken the earth away, the ground away, so you can see, right? The sun is just set, but Venus is still up in the sky, which is how it would be when you were born, right? Which you can see on the chart, just what you're describing.
And I can just add, I mean, this wouldn't apply to everyone with a evening star Venus, but I can just say for myself, my Venus happens to be conjunct my South Node and in Aries in my 8th house. And yeah, I mean, what you're saying is really resonating because I feel like in my past lives that I can remember very consciously, clearly, they're all about being in a feminine experience that is very dark, like very difficult, and dealing with a lot of the shadow of the masculine feminine dynamic on this planet. And now in this lifetime, I feel like, especially at this point in my life, I'm 45, so I'm like, I feel like I'm sort of entering a different phase of life, but it really is about, it is a feeling. I feel very strongly like, yes, I have been to the underworld, not just in this life, but especially in past lifetimes, with it being there on my south node, right? And now I'm here to move forward. Like even this symposium is an example of like, I'm here to move forward, helping to transmute the shadow and also bring the power, the goodness of the dark to the world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Even this talk that you're doing is like very representative of what that is for me.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it's like you're describing like through lifetimes the literal exact experience of that Venus placement on your chart, right? Like just exactly what you're saying, 8th house, the node, south node, you know, all these kinds of things, evening star. You've been around the block, you've like been into the darkness, you've been into the shadow, and now you're bringing that wisdom up into the next phase, right? It's like, that's so beautifully said. Thank you so much for.
Well, and I'll just add also, and for, you know, a chunk of about 20 years, a good part of 20 years, I primarily was a psychotherapist and social worker working with child abuse, sexual abuse, and, you know, teaching parents and foster parents how to parent in a safe, healthy way, right? So it's like, again, in this lifetime too, I've really gone to the underworld in that sense, and now I'm kind of moving on from there, but bringing the knowledge, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that we're talking about the underworld today.
Oh yeah.
That is so key, right? I mean, everything you're sharing, right? I was born with Venus in the underworld, right? So it's like that's the impetus for me, right? The same type of thing, different way of come about it than you have, but still similar, and wanting to like bring that knowledge forward. So yes, thank you. Cool. We are on the same page. Okay, so the Venus goddess on the evening star journey, over that approximate 8 months, evening star Venus reclaims her authentic wise goddess self, ascending through the chakras. Now we're coming back up out of the underworld, represented by the monthly crescent moon Venus conjunctions, right? Now it's just after the new moon, so it's in the waxing phase, symbolizing her ability to reclaim a healthy relationship with each chakra energy on the way up. So on the way down, we're releasing, letting go. And on the way up, we're reclaiming, re-empowering, right?
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Isn't it? And it's like the waning moon on the way down and the waxing moon on the way up, right? It's just like, it's magic. It's amazing.
Oh my God. That's so beautiful.
And then the last part of the journey is this metamorphic underworld, which lasts about a week, but it can definitely be shorter, and it can be a few days longer as well. And that's when Venus is passing between us and the sun. So again, Venus gets swallowed up into the light of the sun. So she's disappeared from our visible view. She's gone to the underworld again, but it's quick. So she's in the evening sky, she disappears behind the horizon, and then just a mere days later rises in the morning sky and starts the cycle over again. So it's this like powerful, quick journey to the underworld, the rebirth, and the cycle starts again. So the metamorphic underworld Venus goddess spends mere days traveling between the earth and the sun, hidden in the light, undergoing a rapid metamorphic alchemical transformation of death and rebirth into her new goddess self, ready to begin the entire cycle anew. So this cycle that started in January was in Capricorn, and then in 19 months later, this cycle will start again in Leo, right? And then 19 months later, we'll start again in Pisces. So I'll show all that as we move through it. But that's the general framework of the Venus cycle. So here's just putting it all together.
Beautiful. Wow. I love your visuals.
Thank you. I'm a very visual person.
I can tell, definitely.
The slide. Yeah. Like I got to see it visually, right? Morning star, descent to the underworld, rises of the evening star, ascent, metamorphic underworld, and then the cycle starts again.
So if you were to do, let's say, a dance of this cycle and these phases, I mean, this is what I'm feeling, and tell me if it's accurate. It's like, so, okay, so we've got, starting as a morning star, we're going around doing the descent, and then I feel like a drop. It goes into the underworld and it stays there. It feels like a heavier version of going to the underworld, like slower in a sense, like deeper, that's the word. And then we rise as an evening star, and then it feels like almost like it's doing a spiral energetic motion or something, and then it goes to the metamorphic underworld, and then it like it's like a faster kind of transformative time. Okay.
Yes. So like people that are born in the metamorphic underworld phase, right? And the way that you could determine that on your chart is Venus will be retrograde then, as well as within 10 degrees of the sun, right? So that's the way you can tell if you're the metamorphic underworld versus the other longer underworld, you're within 10 degrees of the sun, but not retrograde, right? So people born in that metamorphic underworld will have this, like things will happen quickly in their life. They can go through rapid transformation. They can feel kind of in this in-between space a lot of the time where they're like, not quite there, but not quite there either, right? That they sort of live in that liminal zone, right? Because that is their teacher, right? That phase is part of their evolutionary journey, their initiation, the evolution that they're taking in this lifetime.
So if somebody has Venus retrograde, is there a case where they would not be in the metamorphic underworld phase, or?
Yes. So so Venus will go retrograde longer than the metamorphic underworld lasts.
Right.
But she won't be within that 10-degree orb of the sun. That's what makes it be the underworld, is within that 10 degrees of the sun. You can sometimes see Venus when she's less than 10 degrees from the sun. And sometimes, depending upon your horizon, it takes more than 10 degrees to see Venus. But that's kind of like the general orb that we pick. But if you're pretty close on either side, you're kind of in that transformative time. Am I explaining that clearly?
Yes. So if someone sees that they have Venus retrograde in their chart and it's more than 10, their Venus is more than 10 degrees from the sun, how would they know what they're either a morning star or an evening star, right?
Yes.
And so is there a quick and easy way for them to know which? I mean, I could guess, but
right.
You could explain.
It's just going to be the degrees. Like, is Venus ahead of the sun?
Yeah.
Or behind the sun degrees wise? And then that's what will determine if it's like morning sky or evening sky, right? So you could kind of take the chart and rotate it clockwise. And if the sun sets and Venus is still up like it is for you, then it's evening sky. But if it's not, and you keep going and Venus rises before the sun, if you're turning the chart clockwise, then Venus is morning sky, right? So it depends if Venus is ahead of or behind the sun in the zodiacal degrees on your chart.
So it seems like if somebody wanted to know which of the 4 of these is my Venus in, one way to start would be to look at, is Venus ahead or behind the sun in terms of setting and rising? That would determine it's either in the realm of morning star, in the realm of evening star. And then if it's within 10 degrees of the sun, you now know it's either in the underworld or metamorphic underworld. And if it's retrograde and within 10 degrees, it's metamorphic underworld.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. You just got it. And I realize it's like, it sounds more confusing, but if you start to look at your chart under those parameters, you'll start to see and figure it out. Just like you were like, oh, mine's in the 8th house, so it's behind the sun. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah. Okay, so then let's look at the celestial mythology with the Venus cycle. So the ancient Sumerian myth called Inanna's Descent literally describes the Venus cycle. It's the first written myth that we know of. So it's written on those cuneiform tablets, right? Those symbols pressed into clay that everybody has seen somewhere along the way. One of those is Inanna's Descent, right? Mm-hmm. From ancient Sumer, which is modern day, in the Middle East, like Iraq area. So it's the first written myth that we have, period, right? It follows the entire Venus synodic cycle, that entire 19-month cycle that we just described all those phases of. And this story, this myth, is a cosmological explanation of how the Venus cycle works. So Inanna's Descent is literally a telling of Venus moving through the sky in ancient Sumer. And it's a journey through the Venus gates and the chakras, which I'll explain more.
And do we know historically for a fact that the story of Inanna was tied to the Venus, to the Venus in the sky?
Yes, we do know that is a fact. And I'm completely spacing. I should know this. It's like, there was a few different people that started tracking that, like Diane Wolfstein. Is that how you say her last name? Or Wolfstein? There's a few people that have tracked and started to kind of put it together with astronomy software and started to see how, this telling was exactly that, because like her aid is called Ninshabar. That was Mercury. That was part of that cycle. The moon coming around was like this crescent, it was like there's like so many different ways that they have gone through and looked to see that, yes, this is an actual storytelling of the Venus cycle. It's just done through this mythological teaching. That's which beautiful. I think more and more we're starting to realize that a lot of these ancient stories or myths in quotation marks that have withstood the test of time have had to do with cosmological, astronomical things that were going on, interestingly.
Really cool. Mm-hmm.
So the Descent of Inanna, and here it is, one of the cuneiform tablets on the left was written in the 2503 to 2501 BCE is what they think. And that's an image of Inanna, or sometimes also Ishtar on the right. Those two can be very interchangeable in images. So the Venus cycle is alchemy, the journey through Inanna's 7 gates. So in the story, Inanna passes through 7 gates as she descends into, and then as she ascends back out of the underworld in the story, because that's how many of those conjunctions were happening at that particular time. So it's usually 7 or 8 is what happens. So descending.
The conjunctions of Venus and the crescent moon.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So descending, she removes a vestment, some sort of ceremonial garment at each gate. Okay. So as she's preparing to go to the underworld, she's going to visit her sister whose husband has just passed away. So at each, she dresses in her finest regalia. She's the queen of heaven, right? And some say the queen of heaven and earth. So descending, she has to go through these gates, 7 gates. She removes one of these power pieces, one of these ceremonial garments, like her crown, then her lapis lazuli necklace, which is what I'm wearing today, her robe, etc. Right? Then after she's in the underworld, the ascending, she reclaims a vestment at each gate. So the gates are those monthly moon Venus conjunctions, and the gates can be seen as the chakras, right? So the descent is that morning star journey through the crown to the third eye, to the throat, the heart. We're at the solar plexus now. That's the one that just happened. And the ascent, the evening star journey, you come from the root and come back up through the 7 gates or the 7 chakras. So each month, the crescent moon conjuncts Venus, and these refer to the chakras, and we see them in the morning sky and in the evening sky, right? So here's morning sky, it's in the east, the sun is over here to the left. This is northern hemisphere photographs. The evening sky, the sun is over here to the right, the west, again, northern hemisphere. And these are the conjunctions that you can see, right? It's a pretty beautiful thing to go out and see in the morning and the evening sky.
Did you take these photos?
I did not take these photos. Well, wait, the one on the left, I did take. The one on the right, I did not. I've taken a lot of them. That's when we were first talking before we started. I was like, oh, I was going to put a photo in of the last gate, but I forgot. So anyway.
It's okay. This is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing. So this Venus Inanna ceremonial journey is a powerful initiatory journey through that entire 584-day Venus cycle, or those 19 months. Guided by the ancient Sumerian telling of the Inanna's descent, which we now understand is an actual telling of the Venus cycle, right? And the ancient Sumerians, they celebrated collectively this whole cycle every 8 years. Then on a descent story is a little description of how Venus moves through the sky. It's a myth with massive implications for our current time. It describes the collective descent into and renewal out of the patriarchal culture, right? That's a way that we can work with it now, right? Some say that Inanna went to the underworld to mourn the death of the age of Taurus, right? That's what was happening at that time, right? As we started to move into that more patriarchal aspect that we've been living in, right? So our personal initiatory death and rebirth processes as orchestrated by the divine feminine, just like we were talking about that journey into the underworld, into the dark, to then be able to bring that back out. And it's a conscious initiation into the Venus mysteries with the earth and the sky, because it's always from our earthly perspective that we're seeing that relationship between the moon and Venus and Venus and the sun. So it brings us into both. So this is just like a little review of what we've gone through. The mythic tale of Inanna literally describes Venus as she moves through her 4 main phases. Venus takes 584.5 days, or about 19 months, to go through one synodic cycle. Morning star is the descent, removing chakra vestments. Venus is visible in the morning sky for about 8 months. The underworld, the shamanic death and rebirth. Venus is within 10 degrees of the sun, not visible for 60 to 90 days. The evening star, the ascent, reclaiming chakra vestments. Venus is visible in the evening sky for about 8 months. And the metamorphic underworld, the changing identity, the retrograde Venus is within 10 degrees of the sun, not visible for approximately 8 days. It's different every time. Everyone is born somewhere in the story, just like Martha and I were discussing. It's part of your Venus signature that goes beyond the sign of Venus at your birth, right? There's more to it. Like, were you born in the Capricorn cycle? Were you born in the Leo cycle? Were you born in morning sky? Were you born in the metamorphic underworld? Along with, is your Venus in Pisces or Leo or Aries, right? So there's layering to it that's just more clues and teachings for us. And then the Venus cycle returns. So every 8 years, Venus returns to nearly the same place in the sky on nearly the same date, right? So we all have a Venus return every 8 years on our charts. There's 5 19-month synodic cycles of Venus every 8 years, right? That's what makes up the whole greater cycle. The current 5 Venus cycles are occurring in the zodiac signs of Capricorn, Leo. It will move into Pisces in 2025, Libra, and Gemini, right? Those are the only overtones that can happen right now. And here's just an image of it. So
when you say right now, what do you mean? What's the context of right now? Meaning like
the morning star, when Venus rises in the morning sky, can only occur in one of these 5 signs right now.
Right now, but when you say right now, you mean because
from here going forward. So the last like Venus cycle was Gemini. Before that was Libra. Before that was actually in Aries, but it precesses. So it just changes a couple degrees every time. So now in 2025, it's going to be in Pisces. And then Leo. So when I was born, I'll give an example. So when I was born, it was in the Virgo overtone, but on my first Venus return, when I turned 8, it had precessed into Leo, and it will be, my Venus returns will be in that Leo overtone for the rest of my life, because these each take like 100 years, right? So like I have a client who's in her 70s. She was born in the Aquarius overtone, but it's Capricorn now, and it will be through the rest of her life. And has been that way through a lot of her life, right?
And so these 5 possibilities at this moment will change to other possibilities just in the coming years, like within your lifetime already, one of them was Virgo, and that's no longer one of them.
Correct. And now we're all about to go through was Aries and will be Pisces.
Got it.
And at risk of making it like more confusing, but it was Scorpio for a long time. And the last time it went to Libra, it changed into Libra.
So they go backwards?
They go backwards. Yeah. So it's like, I don't have the degree. Oh yeah, it is the degrees on here. So January 14th, 2022, that's when this current Venus cycle that we're in started, was at 15 Capricorn. January 12th in 2030 will be the next time it's in Capricorn, and that'll be at 13 Capricorn. So it's moving slightly back each time, precesses, right?
So let's say, for example, somebody has a significant point at around 15 degrees Capricorn, like whatever, some major planet or their ascendant or whatever.
Then, yeah, or Venus.
Venus. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that for you? I can guess again, but
yeah. So it's like this Venus cycle is starting on that planet, right? It's lit up from that. So if it's Venus, or it's like it's your birthday during this time, right? So you were born during a Capricorn overtone. It's coming back to your birthday. You're in a Venus return, which is a significant time of when, again, it doesn't matter about gender. It's not about that at all. It's just that whenever we have a Venus return, it's a time for us to take our sacred feminine aspect to the next highest level, right? It's initiation cycle of that full 19 months, not just the time when it's right around your birthday, but the full 19 months to step into the next like higher level of our sacred feminine expression. It helps us to step more into what is the original intent of our coming here around the sacred feminine specifically, right? Just like a Mars return would be the same thing of our masculine expression, right? So if you were, you know, having something significant when the Venus cycle is starting, you know, is, even if it's not your Venus, I would say it's going to, there's going to be an element of an initiation around your sacred feminine with that planet, even if it's not Venus, right? That it's going to, there's going to be a lighting up and activation around the feminine around that planet.
Right.
Yeah. So here we can see, this is the way that it moves through the sky. So every 8 years, you have these Venus returns when Venus comes to a starting point that's very close to where she was on your birthday. So you have Venus returns at age 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, etc., all the way on through, right? Where it's going to be in that same part of the sky, which we'll see next here in this slide. So it's just another way of looking at what we just looked at here. But now we have the constellations, so we can see kind of the backdrop of where this is occurring in the sky every 8 years.
Amazing visuals again. Wow.
Yeah.
So cool.
And then
Wow.
the thing that I think is the coolest is, look, it makes the pentagram through the sky, which we're going to see now.
Oh,
So
wow.
Venus creates this 5-petal rose pentagram as it moves through the sky every 8 years. The pentagram has long been associated with the divine feminine, the goddess, protection, magic, the five elements, etc. To the Egyptians and the Celts, the pentagram represented an underground womb where we are reborn, right? So this is the pattern that Venus makes through the sky every 8 years, right? This is the dance of Venus, the earth, and the sun that you were talking about, right? Amazing. And here, next, we have a little video, really short little video that shows it.
Whoa.
So here's Venus and the earth dancing around the sun, creating this 5-petaled rose pentagram. And I'll let it run through a couple times so we can kind of see how that happens.
Literal, right? Actual magic. Yeah.
Yes, right? Literal actual magic, right? That this is what it creates. The little points are like that Capricorn, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Pisces, right? That pentagram, that's the place where Venus is rising as morning star each time, right?
Well, and it's just, it just cannot be a coincidence that then on this planet, you know, we have actual life forms that look like that.
Yes.
Right? That plant life grows also in a similar way.
Yes,
to
exactly.
To the dance of our planets. I mean,
totally. Right? That's why it's called the rose of Venus.
Wow.
The Venus cycle is rose, right? All these things that all of a sudden it's like rose is associated with the feminine, the 5-pointed stars associated with the feminine. Oh, wow. Now we start to get and know and understand why, if we didn't already, right? Plenty of you probably were already aware of that, but.
No, I am learning a lot here. I'm sure lots of other people know more than I do for sure, but wow. Yeah, this is amazing.
Pretty amazing, right? I'll just let this one finish out. And then it's just so cool, isn't it? I mean, I could just watch this forever.
So pretty.
There it is. And then now we are taking a journey into the underworld. So let's talk about that specifically in the context of the Venus cycle, but also just in general, right? So it's like, as I was sharing, we're in that solar plexus chakra now, right? Then we'll move to the sacral, then we'll go to the root, right? And Then, because we have 8 gates this time, we have the death by intent gate of when we go into that earth star chakra, the one that's just beneath our feet, that's actually into the earth. And then we move into the underworld. So that death by intent gate, we're consciously choosing to go to the underworld, right? When Venus is hidden from the sun, and that'll start September 14th. So we have the summer that we're moving through the rest of the chakras with each crescent moon, Venus conjunction. Then we go to the underworld. And I wanted to talk about the underworld because I feel that the underworld is the key to healing the divide, which is exactly what the symposium is about, right? Rebecoming the one, healing our relationships to gender, sexuality, and life itself, right? Healing our relationships to duality, polarity, the separation. The underworld for me is the healing, restoration place. It's where we go when we need that transformation, that rejuvenation, when we need to be reborn. It's the death part of the circular cycle, right? That brings the renewal, right? We can't have the new seeds, you know, germinate that didn't come from the fruit that rotted, right? It just doesn't happen. It's that cycle where we clear and cleanse and we grieve and rage and we go inward and compost and transform, right? So for me, so much of like the gender divide and the issues around all of that that we're seeing, and people's discomfort with how the world is changing as we're moving more towards this non-binary piece, is that for tens of thousands of years, we revered this cyclical view of things, right? We honored all aspects of that. But, you know, about 5,000 years ago, kind of around that time of the Inanna's descent being written in those cuneiform tablets, we started to turn away from the feminine, right? Towards the masculine more solely. And we began to equate the feminine with like the dark, destruction, death, right? We got really linear in our thinking, right? We moved way into the left brain and started functioning much more from that place. And we started to fear the dark and make the dark bad, and fear that part of the cycle, and fear death, and fear the feminine, and make the feminine less, and associate all these things with the dark and make the light good, right? So we started making this polarity where it became a line as opposed to a circle, right? And so if we think about the Chinese yin yang symbol, which is the symbol of wholeness, right? We turned away from the yin. We've made the yin bad and the yang good, right? So it's like we say the feminine is bad, the dark is bad, the yin is bad, right? It's easier to kind of see the craziness of that when we think about it in terms of yin yang, because we're not so like gripped around terminology of like masculine, feminine, or the patriarchy, or these things, or the dark, right? I mean, even now in so many spiritual circles, it's always about going to the light, right? Bringing things into the light, all about the light. Maybe now we might be okay with venturing to the dark because we're kind of starting to see that maybe there's a worthwhile piece of healing that happens there. But boy, that's to get us back to the renewal and the light and the rebirth, you know? So I feel like we've turned away from the wholeness, right? The unity of what you're talking about, the re-becoming the one, right? And I feel that the way to do that, like we want to regain the unity. We're talking about that so much, but the heart is the path to the unity. And the heart is in the underworld, right? That's the place that we go to tune into that. That's where we go to feel the feelings. That's the place where we go to heal. It's the place where we go to accept the parts of ourselves that we're uncomfortable with, or we don't like, or we judge. But it's like, that's the yin, that's the wholeness, right? For me, that is the path of how we come back into the one. is to bring the dark back to the same elevated status that we carry the light in, right? So when we're like, dark things happen, or like a Pluto, oh, you're going to a Pluto cycle, oh my God, I'm sorry, that's so bad, right? It's like, you know, all that stuff, it's like we don't even realize how we're like propping up the patriarchy by saying the dark is bad. You know what I mean? Pluto cycle's bad. It's like, because the light is good, you know? So, and I always just like to clarify, like, I am not associating the patriarchy with men or people who identify as men. I just always like, it's been bad for all of us, you know? We all want to move beyond that. So, yeah, I've been like talking for a while. So what would you like to say about that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts, reflections. I'll just say that everything you're saying is very complements several of the other talks, and I'll just name them real quick so people can go find them, because if you haven't watched them yet, and this is resonating, definitely watch these ones. So on this day of exploring the feminine, the key one that really complements what you're talking about is the one with Vivian Monroe on the dark feminine. And so in that one, we dive really deeply into everything you just said, and look at like other feminine archetypes. But one of the things that, sorry, really quick, I'll name a couple others and then I'll say what I was about to say. Another two, all of these talks really are related to what you're talking about, but another two that are particularly related are on the first day of talks, which is day 2, Anne Baring's talk, and the one with Heather Ensworth. They both talk about the historic big picture of where we've been, where we are, and where they feel like we could be going with regard to Heather Ensworth specifically talks about the precessional ages and our journey from you know, like you were talking about, the end of the age of Taurus into the age of Aries, into the age of Pisces, and then now transitioning into the age of Aquarius. So she very specifically talks about the astrology of it, but Anne Baring is not an astrologer. She is a feminist scholar. She's 90 and she's an amazing, beautiful human. She's a feminist scholar. She attended Oxford and she's written some classic books on the reemergence of the feminine. And specifically what we talked about in her talk is her latest book, which is on the soul of the cosmos and the need, her view that we need to come back to our sense of the sacred in ourselves, ourselves as the sacred, and to bring back together the wholeness of, you know, our left brain, right brain, our rational selves, our spiritual selves, our sacred selves, our heart. And Heather both say, yeah, the gateway is really our heart. So all these themes are just, you know, really resonating so much, and yeah, giving me chills. So definitely highly recommend those, all of those, but and everything else, of course, too. But one of the things that Vivian and I touched on is when we're talking about the dark feminine, but the kind of darkness, I guess, in general, one of the key distinctions for us both is that the dark can be scary, partly because if it is unchecked, like if it is just goes wild, it can be out of balance and it can be very destructive in a not conscious way, right? And at the same time, if we're able to be in integrity and really in our own self agency with it, it is literally life giving. I mean, it's life ending in the service of life giving. So like you said, a tree dies, it composts into earth. That is what fuels the seed of the flower that's going to bloom. Like that flower can't live without other things having died. Literally, it's a truth. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that flower is going to die.
Right.
And something else will be born from that as well. Totally.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects, the necessity of going to the underworld, but I mean, what for you is the most key aspect of it? Like what's like the biggest takeaway that you would want to gift anybody in this world with regard to that?
Well, I think it comes back to, for me, it's going to start with awareness, right? Because we're so conditioned that the dark is bad and the light is good, right? For so long in so many different ways. So I think the first place to start is just with awareness. And same thing for me, right? I'm not saying, oh, I'm so far along on this journey. I'm just saying this, I think, is the key, right? So every time that, I catch myself thinking like, oh, that's the dark side of things, or that's something that's bad, or like move towards the light, right? If I'm focused on the light to the exclusion of the dark, light is good, dark is bad. I want to remember that that's saying yang is good and yin is bad.
Totally.
Right?
Right.
And then it's saying masculine is good, feminine is bad.
Right.
Or white is good,
Right.
black is bad, right?
No.
So you
Yes.
can see how all of this just starts to move into racism, all of the homophobia, all the issues around gender stuff, all of the sexism, right? All of the separation and the polarity, I think, tracks back to this one thing. And so the more that we can increase our awareness of it and start to shift, oh yeah, I don't actually want to be saying that the dark is bad anymore. I want to start to make the dark be okay and be a place that we go inside to transform, because that's what we'll start to see on the outside, right? That's the path to ending all of the duality, right? That's the path back to unity and wholeness for me.
So yeah. I have one sort of technical question-ish, and then I have a deeper question. Just for my own learning here, and maybe for people who are kind of into astrology might also find this question interesting. So just thinking about somebody looking at their astrology chart, and they're trying to think about what part of the Venus cycle was Venus in the moment they were born, right? Or if they're looking at anything and they want to see where is Venus and what does that mean. So I understand now how to find which of those 4 phases you were born under. And so I'm guessing, of course, you could then go back and trace what sign of the Venus cycle was Venus in. So like if a baby is born now, that baby would be born under the Capricorn Venus cycle, right?
Yep.
So, but what I'm wondering is, I'm assuming you look at which gate a person was born under. Yeah. And so what's significant? So let's say somebody's born now, and so they're born during the Capricorn cycle at the sacral chakra gate or near it or whatever. Could you describe what that would signify to you, or how you use that?
Yeah. So if it's someone that's born, because right now we're at the solar plexus, but say okay, they'll be born at the sacral one, right? Okay. So that will be a teacher tool for them throughout their lives, right?
If they're born now, it's the solar plexus one. Okay.
Yes.
And so the solar plexus energetic would be a teacher?
Yes. Would be a guide for them. A teacher is part of their evolutionary journey, another layer for them, right? It's another layer that brings in. And you only have a gate if you're in the morning sky or the evening sky, right? I'm born in the underworld, no gates there, right? So it's more of what's considered sort of like this in-between time. Or I could definitely say the underworld has been my greatest teacher, right? And hence why I want to bring the underworld back.
Right. Okay. So the idea is when you look at Venus for you, for anybody, what you're looking as where in the Inanna story was Venus the moment I was born. So if Venus, it already is in that underworld, there are no more gates to go through because she's gone through all the gates. She's down there. And so if she's either on her way down or her way up, she will have just passed through XYZ gate, and she will be coming up to the next gate, whatever that is. So let's pretend, yeah, someone is born with Inanna having just moved through the solar plexus gate, which is what we just did, right? So then if that solar plexus energy is a teacher or a guide for them, how would you work with that? Like, how would you advise them, or what would you?
Yeah. So I would first start off by like checking in and seeing how that resonates for them, right? Has that been, you know, as stepping into your personal power, identity, self-will, you know, the issues around the solar plexus chakra, those energies, how is that played out for them in their life, right? And more times than not, it's going to be like, this has been a significant thing for me. Or like the throat chakra. I had no voice. I was afraid to speak. I couldn't like say anything, right? I got shamed as a kid. I was told to shut up, or violent, right? All kinds of things can happen. But then it's like, I'm learning how to use my voice. I'm learning how to communicate. I'm learning how to step into that. My heart, right? Love, right? All those types of things, crown, how to connect, right? Root, how to ground, those issues will more than likely take a bigger role in that person's life as part of what teaches them and helps them step more and more into who they are and what they've really come here to be, right? Their evolutionary journey will be guided by teachings around those chakras.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and I'm assuming you do that in one-on-one sessions with people in addition to classes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then my second question is, when you are doing these, you do a 19-month cycle of classes. Is that how you do it? Teaching the Venus cycle? Yeah.
You can do like first half or the second half, you don't have to do the whole 19 months, but we offer them for the whole 19 months. Yep. Over and over and over. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you just briefly describe why do you do that? Like, what I'm imagining is, what are the benefits? Like, what have you seen and what have you experienced in yourself? What have you seen other people experience when they do align with this or learn about this Venus cycle and really follow? I've heard of a lot of people saying, I'm now on a journey of following the Venus cycle and it's changing my life, right? So I would love to hear, I believe you, and tell me more. What is that?
Yeah. So what really brought me to shamanic astrology was Cayelin and Tammy Brunk, who founded Venus Alchemy with her and used to teach the Venus journeys with her until she's just stepped aside and is doing other things now, and I've stepped in, right? So the first thing I learned from the two of them was just this little free webinar they did about Venus in the underworld, and I realized that was me and my signature, and all of a sudden it validated my whole entire life, right? When you're talking about the populations that you used to work with as a social worker, is that what you said, or a psychologist? Yeah.
Yes.
That was my history, right? The demographic that you were working with, that's my history. And all of a sudden, to me, it was like, oh, wow, this is my teacher the underworld is my teacher of how my soul is evolving, right? How, for me, my truth is I came here, right? I made the choices to come here because my soul wants to evolve. And I've made these choices to have these experiences to teach me. And that's just the way I'm looking at it. I don't think anybody else needs to look at it that way, but that's how it's always been for me. So learning that I was born with Venus, and for me, Mars as well, in the underworld, all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this is my evolutionary journey. And all of a sudden I can like get on board with that, right? It's not like, whoa, a lot of heavy stuff happened and I'm learning my best to like grow and heal through that. But all of a sudden it took on this like greater importance of, this is my soul's evolutionary journey. And now all of a sudden I'm so empowered by that. So that was the starting place for me. But then starting to track and follow and get out in the early morning and see Venus and watch her move through the sky, tune me into that cosmological experience. I came into shamanic astrology, as you mentioned, as a holistic health practitioner and a medicinal aromatherapist and all these kinds of things. So I'd been like tuning into the earth, constantly to the earth, right? The earth's gifts, the earth's medicine, the earth's tools, right? All of a sudden, this gave me that to the sky. And I didn't even realize that was like the other half I'd been missing to make the whole, right? So it became this like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, this is what my ancestors did, right? This takes me back into my DNA, to the place that I want to be and live, where I'm aware of what's happening on the earth and what's happening in the sky. And I have my place within it, right? Now I am a part of the one, of the whole, right? They're both there and they're both me. And that's what really, I think, is the magic of following the Venus cycle, because she's so bright. She's so unmistakable. It's not hard to find. You're not trying to like, constantly like figure out this constellation to reach to that, to find, all of a sudden it's like you're journeying with that. And for me, who identifies as a woman, stepping into my sacred feminine was really empowering for me. But now I follow Mars and I'm stepping into the sacred masculine, which I realize has been pretty well developed in a lot of ways within me, because I'm raised in the patriarchy, but all of a sudden it's like I can bring them both together and marry those energies and come into more wholeness with the earth and the sky, right? I mean, and just being out there, it's like magical to see that, you're with people like, no, everyone will notice Venus, but no one knows that. And you can be like, whoa, that's Venus. And I know. And all of a sudden it's like, there's a lineage that comes through, because that's what all of our ancestors were doing until the pretty recent past, so it's like, it's the deepest connection into the one for me that I've experienced. Yeah.
Amazing. I think this might be my last question. Is anyone teaching similar classes on the Mars cycle?
So Eric Roth, who is in the symposium as well, he and Daniel Giamario teach on the Mars cycle. The Venus cycle is very like eloquent. We saw the design. It's the same thing every 19 months, every 8 years. The Mars cycle is bigger than that. It's longer. And it's also, I don't know what word I want to use, but it's a little bit more like complicated. Like Mars is not as bright in the sky. And when Mars, you can first see, it's really not bright in the sky, so there's, at least right now in this morning sky phase. So it's, so they do teach on it, but not in the exact same way, because it just doesn't have that, it's just more complicated, I would say. But Eric and Daniel do both teach on it together periodically. And you could find that at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. But it's not like a monthly ceremonial journey the way Cayelin and I do with the Venus cycle. But it is teaching about the Mars cycle.
Yeah. And Eric because you recommended him to me, thank you for that. Yeah, he did his talk. I already recorded his talk, and it is about the Mars archetypes, you know, taking Mars through the zodiac, but he did not go into the full Mars cycle or this kind of relationship that we could have with the Mars cycle. So I'm gonna have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really, on a personal level, I would love to understand that better also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then following both of those, right, there's that sacred marriage piece of moving beyond the binary, right, within ourselves.
Exactly.
And then that extends out. So,
right. And Shu Yap, her talk is about the Mars Venus synodic cycle with each other. If that makes sense.
Yes.
So that gets into the sacred union dance of Mars and Venus astrologically. And she talks about how so Venus was starting this new 8-year cycle in Capricorn in January of 2022, but then also Venus and Mars were starting 2 different cycles. I think it's 350 or 360 year one synodic cycle together with Venus retrograde, and then a separate synodic cycle with Venus going direct, that started. So one started in the retrograde one started, I think, in February of 2022, which is a 350, 360 year synodic cycle. But then on March 6th of 2022, which is the day after my birthday, the day after I got the whole like download for this symposium, the vision that came through, was the beginning of a 1200 year synodic cycle between Venus and Mars.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that.
Yes, you should.
I mean, I have to watch all the ones that you like mentioned and more. You know, when we all met on that panel, I was like taking notes of like, I want to watch this site, I want to watch this talk, I want to watch this talk.
Yeah. Oh, they're all amazing. They're all amazing. Right. But anyone who's interested in astrology, and specifically this aspect of, you know, the astronomical and astrological significance of what do this dance of these planets represent or signify or reflect, with regard to our relationship to gender and sexuality. I mean, I highly recommend every single one of these, because it's just fascinating how they all go together. Yeah. And I'll just say that 350, 360 year synodic cycle that started in February of 2022 was in Capricorn. And then the 1200 year cycle that started on March 6, 2022 was in Aquarius at 0 degrees Aquarius, right? So that was just fascinating to me, given the vision of this symposium. Totally. It's like pretty much sums it up. We are now embarking on a brand new relationship of the Mars-Venus dance, literally in the sky. It's actually happening, and it's reflecting right here with us. This whole thing that we're doing.
No, I love it. I mean, that's why I'm like so grateful for the whole like non-binary movement, because wow, now it's a both and situation rather than an either or. And thank you for helping us all come into more unity within that, right? I mean, I could like cry. That's so
well. And then I have to say, of another talk that I highly recommend you watch and everybody watch is the one with Joe G, who is part of Astrology Hub, and they spoke specifically about Mercury being the binary busting planet, right? And then also Jonathan Coe, I haven't recorded, I'm recording his talk tomorrow, their talk, goodness. Okay, Jonathan's talk is also going to be about Mercury, just from a slightly different angle, but also regarding the non-binary realities. And so I can't speak about Jonathan's yet, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But Joe's is, I literally think that talk could change the world. I am not exaggerating.
Wow.
Just a standalone, just that one in and of itself, you have to watch it. I changed. I changed in that hour. I don't know. I transformed. I don't know what happened to me, but yeah, I mean, Joe is, you know, coming from a younger generation than us. And I think they're late, maybe 29, 30-ish. So kind of in between my age and my 15-year-old's age. And my 15-year-old identifies as gender fluid, right? So I've had a lot of these conversations with my 15-year-old. But it felt like Joe could kind of bridge that generation for me. And
Wow.
it was phenomenal, like,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then so many others, like, I don't want to leave out anybody, but those are the ones that are really coming to my mind right this second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I have one quote I'm going to read.
Cool.
This is from Fred Gustafson, but it's quoted in Demetra George's book, Mysteries of the Dark Moon, from Fred's book, The Black Madonna. It is not enough to say that we need a renewed relationship to the feminine in our times. What is needed is a relationship to the dark side of the feminine.
Oh, I love it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I just read that this morning and I was like, oh, I'm totally bringing that in. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I always like to bring aromatherapy into things. So I'll just throw that in. But like essences that I think are amazing to help us with the underworld are like vetiver. It's a root. It's a long root that's so much longer than the plant grass that's on top. Black pine, black spruce, cade, black cumin. All of these are essences that really help us to cultivate and be more okay with the underworld and with the darker aspects of ourselves. And since this symposium is about the unity, the Artemisias are amazing about bridging the duality, bridging masculine and feminine, right and left hemispheres. And that's like mugwort or sagebrush or Artemisia vulgaris, or Sweet Annie is another Artemisia. Even tarragon that we use in cooking is an Artemisia. And they are plants that lead the way. They go into an area and then we follow. They let us know that this is a safe area. We can grow food, arable land, that type of thing. So they lead the way. They lead the way for us. So
that's beautiful. That's a whole other world to learn. Yes, there's so many things for people to connect with you about. And speaking of that, what would you like people to know about what you're offering now or in the future? What's going on in your world? How can people connect with you? And what can they do with you? Yeah.
You can always find me and everything I'm doing at SheridanSemple.com, just my name. And my free gift for the symposium is just a guide to astrology and aromatherapy. So if you're interested, if this is something that you're interested in, I have this like whole free guide. You can look at like what essences I recommend for different signs and the way you go about using them within your chart as well. But then, you know, I do shamanic astrology readings. I do aromatherapy readings. I teach classes and all of these things and certifications. And I do the Venus Alchemy with Cayelin. If it's something that you're interested in, people can jump into that at any time. Yeah, I think that's about it. You could always just find anything I'm doing on my website too. So
cool. All right. So right this minute, you're teaching the Venus Alchemy class with Cayelin. Is there any other thing that you're teaching right this second?
I'm teaching, I have a aromatherapy, medicinal aromatherapy certification coming up in July. I'm teaching one right now that's coming to a close in the next couple of weeks. And then the next one will be starting. I do a new online new moon ceremony every month as a way. Then I teach about the astrology and the astronomy, and I always teach about the aromatherapy. And then we do like a full ceremony and set our intentions within that. I do that every month. And yeah, I think that's all of the immediate classes I have coming up.
A lot. That's a very full life. That's beautiful.
But oh my God, I'm so fortunate to do what I love to do.
Yeah.
I'm so blessed. Thank you.
You
I'm
are.
so grateful. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
wonderful.
So
Cool. Any other last thing you feel like you need to say?
no, I'm just really, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is I'm just really grateful to be here with you and be a part of this symposium. Like when we all met and were speaking, I just felt like, oh, wow, these are all my people and we're all hearing the same call. We're just coming at it in our own unique individual ways, but it just felt so validating and grounding and connecting to be like, oh, wow, this whole thing that's going on inside my heart and my head and my body, others are feeling the same call. And I just feel really grateful that you're doing this. And I feel really grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've said this to a few people, but can't remember if I've ever said it to you, but I've been looking for people to have these conversations with for literally years. And so when I got the, you know, the immediate download vision thing that happened on my birthday in March of this year, I was like, great. Well, that's a great vision. And where am I going to find these people to have these conversations with? Well, 38 or 37 or whatever it is of you showed up, and here we are. There's so many. But also, I mean, so many people who want to have the conversation, but also people who are in so much integrity and love. And I mean, well, it's really blowing my mind. And then also to start hearing from people who have started signing up for this, to be part of the symposium as participants, and they're starting to fill out the survey that I've sent out. And so I'm hearing from people about their intentions for being part of this as well. And I mean, so many people are saying, wow, I have been looking for this kind of thing. This is such amazing timing. Thank you so much. I don't have anybody who I can speak to about XYZ thing. And suddenly here it is. And anyway, I don't know. I can't explain it. And I'm in awe, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. And I'm grateful to you for showing up and yeah, bringing in Eric, and then, you know, anyway, just being part of everything. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. And more to come, I'm sure.
Yes.